Shalom, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, all praises and the blindness due to Yahweh by Hashem HaMashiach wa Malak Yahushai. Secondly, this is Brother Yardan W. Fighter Torah coming back at you with yet another cold cut. Today in this cold cut, we're going to be reading Acts the 15th chapter. Now, this is a beautiful chapter. It gives you another perspective on law and mercy and how to build up one in this truth. So let's begin with the book of Acts chapter 15, verse 1. I'm going to read as much as I can today through the Spirit. And it reads, "And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved." That's a heavy doctrine to push. Now, of course, naturally, we understand that circumcision is required. It is a commandment. There is no maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. And I'll prove that. Let's start with the foundation, the inception of where circumcision began. Let's get the book of Genesis, chapter 17, verse 16. And it reads, I'll start further at 14. And the uncircumcised man child, who flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. And that's true. We get that. But let's continue to read and further unravel this mystery. And God said unto Abraham, As from Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Alright, let's jump further down. Verse 24. And Abraham was 90 years old. 90 years old and 9, when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old, when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And the self same day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And so we see our forefather Abraham get circumcised. And we read, as the Lord said in verse 14, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. And some may argue, some may plead that that's exactly what those Jews were saying in the book of Acts, the 15th chapter, in the first verse. So let's read that again. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. However, that's a harsh and heavy burden to put upon somebody, especially if they're a Gentile. And by Gentile, I'm referring to an Israelite foreigner. An Israelite foreigner in this case is an Israelite that has been Hellenized and has been adopting the ways of Greek and Roman culture. For an example, Timothy's father. I'll pull that out in the next chapter. Acts chapter 16, verse 1. Then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there, named Timotheus, the son of a certain woman, which was a Jewess, and believed, but his father was a Greek. So his father being a Greek means that he was adopted into the fashion and likeness of the world he was around, which was Greco-Roman culture. And so by that I mean he was worshiping Adonis, Zeus. Perhaps he wore a toga. Maybe he had the little circle with the leaves, a crown of leaves on him. I forgot what they call them. But nevertheless, you can get a good idea on what type of time he was on. Now that's not to say he's the two-third or he was just plain out wicked. We don't have that much information to say so. It's just the background of his father and his mother, and how his father was Hellenized. And so with that, let's jump back to Acts chapter 15, verse 2. When therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small decision and disputation with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the elder and to the apostles and elders about this question. So it was a bit of controversy, because from Paul's perspective, he understands what mercy and grace is. After all, the old man was Saul. And Saul, if you don't know, he was a murderer. He was a serial killer. He was persecuting the church and the saints until he had that revelation on the road to Damascus. And so when he's hearing everything, it's pretty new to him. It's pretty what's the word I should look for? It's pretty shocked to hear that these people aren't going to be saved when he himself was saved by the grace and mercy of the Most High God. So he has a bit of a different perspective. Now with that, it doesn't mean that Paul was only teaching you have grace and mercy. Of course we do, but you also have to have works that parallels that faith. So with that, jump into verse 3. And being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles. And they caused great joy unto all the brethren. And now again, those Gentiles, when you look up into the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, it usually refers to non-Israelites. But then you have cases to where Gentiles is actually speaking about Israel, Israelite foreigners. And I'll prove that. Let's prove all things. Let's get the book of, what shall we get? Corinthians. We'll get 2 Corinthians. Nope. Before we get that, I want to get Ephesians 2:11. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles. So Paul is writing his letter to the church of Ephesus saying that you were a Gentile. The last time I checked, you can't change your nationality, you can't change your ethnicity. You are who you are. And so when he says, remember in time past you were Gentiles, he's speaking in a sense of remember that you used to behave and move in the spirit of a Gentile, as these heathen, as that old man. When you look back at your life and ask yourself what kind of man I was or woman you were, it'll come to realize that, wow, I was a heathen. I was like the nations. I was vile, I was wicked, I was smoking, I was drinking, I was getting high. I was doing everything ungodly under the sun. So again in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 11, wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So the circumcision were the Jews, and they were calling the uncircumcised, the Gentiles, uncircumcised, right? They was calling them uncircumcised as an insult. It's kind of getting on them, railing on them. I mean, they even said, we read earlier, that you cannot be saved. Now again, faith and works are parallel. So with that, let's jump back. Let's continue to read in verse 12. That at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Now we know that this is speaking about Israel because in the book of Romans, Paul wrote to the church in Rome, stating in Romans chapter 9 verse 1 on down that the promises were given unto Israel, no other nation. Now he's not contradicting himself. By this he means that you were an Israelite, but because of Hellenization that happened under the Greek rulership, you were kind of wedged out. That philosophy of Greco-Roman influence wedged you from knowing that you're an Israelite, knowing about circumcision, know about the laws, statutes, and commandments. So with that, let's jump back to Acts chapter 15, verse 3. Let's jump down to verse 4. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them. But there rose up certain of the sect of Pharisees, which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Now, understanding words, Pharisee just simply means a master of the law, right? These people were studious. They understood the law. They upheld it. Verse 7. And when there had been much disputing, Peter rose up and said unto them, Men and brethren, ye know how that a good while ago God made choice among us, that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And God, which knoweth the hearts, bear them witness, giving them the Holy Ghost, even as he did unto us. And put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Now, when you read the book of Exodus, chapter 11, verse 7, the reason why I'm bringing this out for a reason. It reads this: The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, it's like in verse 7. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between the